Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. We've got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, guys, I'm your host, Marquis Vargas, and today, the show is not really much about fantasy football. Today's show, again, is going to be addressing the recent events that have been going on in the world, and rightfully so, I believe. There, is a ton going on and a lot going on related to the NFL. So I want to speak about a lot of those issues and things that have happened recently, give my opinions on them, my thoughts, and sort of where we go from here. So recently, Drew Brees was under fire. And rightfully so. Essentially, you guys already know the story, so I don't really have to go over it. But it's not necessarily exactly what he said. It has more to do with when he said it, sort of how he said it, and how it dismissed everything that was going on at the time, everything that is going on currently. Since then, since making the comments about, kneeling during the national anthem and quote-unquote disrespecting the flag, Drew Brees has, made thorough apologies, has made videos on Instagram, posts on Instagram about it. And I just wanted to share my thoughts, because I think this is something that, I know a lot of people will say, they're not surprised, but honestly it was shocking for me, because, Drew Brees is a great leader. Drew Brees, excuse me, being the quarterback of the New Orleans Saints, New Orleans, is a place where a lot of African Americans reside. There are large, black communities that look up to Drew Brees, as the quarterback of their team. And it was unfortunate to see. I'm not saying, I'm not giving him any slack or saying, sort of, taking blame off of him, but it was just disappointing to see, in my opinion. But, a lot of the concern was, where do you go from there, right? Because a lot of people believe that the locker room chemistry is sort of gone now. They believe that it will never be the same. They believe that now everyone will look at Drew Brees differently, and rightfully so. So just to give my opinions on that, I will say that this to me felt more like a case of, I truly do not believe that Drew Brees is a bad man or a racist person. I truly do not believe that. Mike Thomas commented when Drew Brees said this and says, he don't know no better. And I think he hit the nail right on the head. I think Drew Brees is just ignorant, and, a lot of people, they toss the word ignorant around, but the definition of ignorant basically means, not knowing, and so he actually, if you go for the textbook definition, lacking knowledge or awareness in general, uneducated or unsophisticated. And so I wouldn't say, this makes Drew Brees a racist. I don't think, when I heard his comments, I didn't automatically, the knee-jerk reaction is, oh my God, Drew Brees is racist. he's against the movement, he's against equality, but, you know, when you look into it deeper, you see the remorse he had. You know, I think he's just ignorant. And I'm glad he owned up to it. I'm glad he owned up to his mistake. I'm glad, and I will say, you know, this time, it didn't feel like the forced apology. You know, I feel like a lot of times when reporters or higher ups and politicians, you know, they say these insensitive things, or they say something in private that comes out, the apologies are forced. The apologies feel like they're just doing it because they know they have to. At this point, there's no other choice. But I will remind everyone, you know, this wasn't a secret. You know, Drew Brees said this on a publicly televised interview. This wasn't something where he was texting a friend, Jake Fromm, and we'll get to that as well today. This wasn't a case, you know, where someone leaked an audio recording or anything like that. Excuse me. So that is why, you know, I do want to give that perspective from, you know, I don't think Drew Brees was on TV, you know, purposefully trying to, you know, fling negativity onto the movement or blacks in general or minorities in general. You know, I think in his mind, he was dead set on, you know, doing any kind of protest for any reason during the national anthem disrespects the flag. He really didn't think it through, and he just, you know, had this thing in his head where my grandfathers fought in wars, and to me, you're disrespecting them, so that makes me not like what you're doing. Of course, he now knows that those kneeling protests, protests in general during the national anthem are much, much more than just kneeling to quote unquote disrespect the flag, which it you know doesn't anyhow. But you know, it seems at this point that he is doing at least anything that he can to sort of reestablish the relationships with his teammates, people he's hurt. He really, honestly, truly seems sorry. And of course, I know there's going to be a lot of people who just, you know, they're going to call it fake. You know, he had to. He's only sorry because, you know, people spoke up, et cetera, et cetera. But it's just my opinion. Some people might not even like my opinion on it. But again, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. Other than that, for people who are calling for him to retire, see, it's interesting because if Drew Brees, you know, all of a sudden said, you know what, I feel like I'm not a good leader. I feel like I can't lead this team after, you know, this big mistake that I made, et cetera, and I'm choosing to retire now. Would I be surprised? Not as much as I would have been before this happened, but I can't say I would be 100% surprised, right? I don't think he should. I think, you know, a true leader can admit when they mess up. A true leader can admit their mistakes when they're wrong, and he's done that. He's taking steps moving forward to fix those mistakes. And one thing I do want to talk about especially is, you know, I think it was just on Instagram. He sends a message on Instagram on his post to Donald Trump. And I understand, you know, it's just a post. It's not really action, but I think it was very, very symbolic. I think this was, you know, a lot of people, you know, don't speak up to Donald Trump. Well, no, I shouldn't say that because there are a lot of celebrities that speak up to Donald Trump, but, you know, people who support Donald Trump don't openly go against him. And I think, it was nice. It was just nice to see. It was a very nice gesture. You know what I mean? Like I said, a big part of being a leader, is knowing that you're wrong, knowing that you have to take steps to fix it, knowing that you have to work together with those that you have wronged, to fix it. And so I like this, and I like that he's sort of calling upon President Trump to also take action. It's very mature of him. It's very, it just shows how good of a leader he is, because I know a lot of people in this country are not fans of the president. And you know, I think as a gesture, as a symbol of support, it was nice to see. But other than that, guys, it was an unfortunate situation. We are in unfortunate times. But to be honest, I'm just glad that, you know, Drew Brees can learn from this. Had Drew Brees never, said this on live TV and gotten the flack for it, he would still be going on ignorantly, thinking that Colin Kaepernick and anyone who kneeled during the protests was disrespecting the flag, and he would be against them for that. And I'm not justifying what he did, guys. I'm just, I'm seeing the positivity in that shred of negativity. You know what I mean? I'm trying to sort of see what good can come out of the situation, because the situation was bad, inherently bad. And so I think if good can come out of that kind of situation, then I'm going to highlight that sort of good. So hopefully, we'll still see the same New Orleans Saints high-powered offense, and hopefully this won't carry over into the season. However, who knows? Malcolm Jenkins, his own teammate, posted, a pretty emotional and pretty serious post in response to Drew Brees, which I commend him for. I really, really like when teammates call out other teammates for irresponsible or inappropriate actions or statements. I think that is probably one of the best ways to show that you are a leader and to show that you're mature and you're an adult and you are about your business and serious about your morals. Because it's very, very hard to call out a teammate, and even more so to call out a man like Drew Brees, who is going to walk into the Hall of Fame. Right, so it's pretty crazy. A guy like Drew Brees who holds the records and everything, right? So it was very, very cool to see teammates speaking up against Drew Brees' statements. A lot of times teammates don't speak up on any issues, right? When someone has a domestic violence charge or this, that, and the third, no teammates usually don't speak up. But to see players and teammates speak up was very, very cool. Now with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. But when we get back, we're just going to continue talking about more things that happen, more pretty shocking things that happen. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info. Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We move on with our difficult, I guess you could say, conversations. I want to move on right now and discuss the recent situation with Jake Fromm, the rookie for the Buffalo Bills. Okay, this situation here is much different than the Drew Brees situation. This one is much more clear cut. This one's much more negative. This one is much more drastic. So you all probably know already, but rookie Jake Fromm, basically a text chain came out from I believe it was a girl he was texting, where they were discussing guns, right? Excuse me. I think the girl asked him if his opinion has changed on guns. He said something along the lines of, no, guns are good. They need to let me get suppressors, something along the lines of that. And then he goes, but I just want guns to be expensive, so only, I know this is a quote, elite white people can get them, haha, end quote. Okay, so to me, at this point in time, at least my knee-jerk reaction. And I haven't really, I haven't had much time to process this one, even though, of course it happened a few days ago, but just because I felt so strongly about it when I read it, I didn't really, think on it for too long. I don't think Jake Fromm should have a job in the NFL. That's just my personal opinion. If we look at, all of these pretty serious statements that the NFL and, Commissioner Roger Goodell have made condemning racism, then Jake Fromm has no place in the NFL, right? This was one of those apologies where you're sorry that you got caught, and now you're forcing the apology, and I don't really buy it. Here's a quote from Jake Fromm. I'm extremely sorry that I chose to use the words elite white person in a text message conversation. Although I never meant to imply that I am a, quote, elite white person, as later stated in the conversation, there's no excuse for that word choice and sentiment. I stand against racism 100%. I promise to commit myself to being part of the solution in this country. Okay. Here's the Bill's statement on it. Earlier today, we became aware of comments made in a text message conversation involving Jake Fromm in 2019. He was wrong and admitted it to us. We don't condone what he said. Jake was honest and forthcoming to us about the text exchange. He asked for an opportunity to address and apologize to his teammates and coaches today in a team meeting, which he did. We will continue to work with Jake on the responsibilities of being a Buffalo Bill on and off the field. This is not enough, at least in my opinion. This is something where it was clear cut. Jake Fromm believes that, based on skin color, white people are more elite than those of color. This is something where, it was just a flat out racist statement, right? When I compare it to Drew Brees' situation, I look at Drew Brees' situation, and this has nothing to do, I just want to put this out there, this has nothing to do with, their track records, their careers, how, I don't want to not to use this word, but elite, no pun intended at all, or joke. Drew Brees is on the field, has nothing to do, I have no bias for that. If someone's racist, I'm going to condemn them no matter who they are. Now, I just want to, and it's hard because I don't want to wish that on someone that they lose their job, right? And they lose their livelihood. But this one is a little, too ridiculous. There are NFL players that reacted to this. I know Shaq Lawson, who used to be on the Bills, he said, Jake Fromm could never be a teammate of mine after saying those words, right? Jake Fromm's former Georgia teammate, Terry Godwin, who's on the Jacksonville Jaguars now, said he lost all respect for Jake Fromm. And you can imagine what the players in Buffalo feel about Jake Fromm, a rookie, nonetheless, not that helps his case at all, but it makes it even worse, a guy who has no respect as it is in the league, saying something that, causes everyone to lose whatever little shreds of respect for you they had in the first place. It's sad, but it's reality. And I know that Jake Fromm isn't the only guy in the NFL, and he's the only guy in the world who shares these sentiments or who has had conversations like this in the past. He's just one of the ones who thankfully got exposed, and I really commend the person who shared the messages. I know that probably took a lot, and it was actually very brave, because this person knew that they would face a ton of backlash for doing it, and she showed, I believe it was a girl, she showed messages from someone related to Jake who said, please take it down, the Bills are talking, he might lose his job, etc., and she says, rightfully, how is that my fault? She's right. It is the situation that Jake Fromm is in is 100,000% his own fault, and it was really, really cool to see, someone, part of his personal or private life standing up to support this movement and doing the right thing, no matter how hard that thing might have been. At this point in time, though, I'm kind of disappointed with the stance of the Bills. Just saying, he said sorry, it's okay, don't worry. That's basically what it was, And for those who, like I said, want to compare it to the Drew Brees situation, Drew Brees made no statement that was openly, outright racist, right? Drew Brees made an ignorant statement that, sort of dismissed the things that are going on outside, and his statements were more of putting the protests and the situation on the back burner, not blatantly being racist, like Jake Fromm's comments were, and that's just my opinion. Drew Brees didn't say, I don't respect any black person who protests the flag, right? Or he didn't say nobody should be protesting the elite whites that are represented by the American flag. He didn't say something along those lines. And I don't think Jake Fromm's ever going to win over his locker room again. I don't even think if he gets a chance to start, I don't even think he'll get a chance to start at this point, but, with Josh Allen there. But, at this point in time, with this, at this current political climate, there's no way for me, to believe, that he gets redemption at this point. And I will remind everyone, Josh Allen, had a little bit of a situation with racist tweets, when he was, being drafted. I don't know if you guys remember, it was just like a couple hours before the NFL draft. Some pictures leaked, and where he was tweeting the N-word, and there was a lot of instances where he was saying the N-word, and he apologized. Clearly, he's still on the team, but it's just a bad look for the Buffalo Bills, who already have had their one starting quarterback have issues regarding race, and now they draft a guy who clearly believes that because your skin is white, you are better than someone else. So that's my statement on that, guys. Jake Fromm shouldn't have a job in the NFL. If they're truly condemning racism, then they shouldn't allow anyone who is known to have been racist or is racist at the current time to, be a part of the league. And whether that is, firing him forever or putting him through a program in which, with a psychologist, where, they can say, he's taken the steps necessary to become a better person and educated himself on, his mistakes, et cetera, et cetera. At least do that. But I don't think, anyone who's racist can just go, oh, I'm sorry, and then be given their job. I mean, and still be able to play, still be able to have no consequence, right? That's just way too easy. I know there is no perfect way to do it. I'm just saying at least have some consequence, put into some sort of program where we can say, at least they're working to make Jake Fromm a better person, not just have, people hurl hate onto him and players trash him and then him go and do the forced apology that we see so often when celebrities, athletes, politicians mess up. So with that, guys, we're going to go into our next break. And when we get back, I'll touch on these issues for, the last time during the show. And of course, later on, we'll move on to some more fantasy football related stuff. So stick around, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Guys, welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Our conversation continues with sort of my third and final segment here of my rant, or I guess discussion about it, about the racial topics and injustices that have been going on in this country and how they relate to the NFL. For the final piece here, I want to discuss the whole the kneeling situation in detail. So the National Football League has said that it's going to allow players to take a knee during the national anthem in protest against racism. Of course, well, actually, first and foremost, I want to say something that sort of needs to be said here. If you do not support the players' ability to protest during the national anthem, then you do not support the NFL, and you're not a fan of your team, and you shouldn't be watching. Because it's not just about protesting. It's not about disrespecting anything or anyone. It's not about disrespecting the anthem. It's not about disrespecting the country. It's about protesting a country that has failed to protect minorities and people of color. It's about showing the disgust, showing the frustration, showing the anger in a very, very peaceful way on a platform that reaches millions and millions of people, right? So if you're one of those people who is upset by this, if you're one of those people who's angry or offended, then you should stop watching football. You should stop watching the NFL, and you're not a true fan. If you were a true fan of your teams and players, then you would support them 100% because this is an inherently good cause. They're protesting for equality. They're protesting so that, boys and girls that are the same color as them, boys and girls who look up to them, and it's not just going to be people of color protesting, so let me make that clear, and kneeling, but so that, minorities in this country can feel safe, can feel equal to those who aren't of color. If you don't support that, you're just an inherently bad person. And so, I just wanted to make that clear, first and foremost. Because, of course, this drew the ire of President Trump, who said we should be standing up straight and tall, ideally with a salute or a hand on heart. There are other things you can protest, but not our great American flag. No kneeling. So clearly, our president still is missing the point. The point that Drew Brees was missing until very recently, and which is why he made an Instagram post tagging Donald Trump, and which is why I can respect Drew Brees for admitting he was wrong. People are confused about them kneeling during the national anthem. The point is the symbolism of it. It's not about, we don't like this, we want to disrespect this. It's, the national anthem is supposed to be a symbol of, pride, patriotism, a symbol of your country's success and the good things about it. But when you don't feel like your country loves you or sees you as equal or sees you as worthy or sees you as a person, why would you salute your country? Why would you, sort of celebrate your country? It makes sense. It makes sense that they're doing this because it's about the symbolism of it. It's about the symbolism of, society says we need to stand during the national anthem, out of respect. So it makes sense. The point is to not disrespect anything. The point is to show you, I guess for the people who are stuck on the respect issue, why should people of color and even, people not of color respect the flag that represents a country that does not respect people of color? Just think about that for 2 seconds. You know what I mean? It shouldn't take you long to realize that doesn't make any sense, right? And if you still, don't agree with that, then clearly you are blind and believe that, people of color are treated equally in this country and even in the National Football League. Vic Fangio, I didn't touch on him, but he recently had statements where he said, quite foolishly, that he doesn't see any racism in the NFL. And he believes everything's based on merit, and there's no racism at all in the NFL or discrimination. But just to give my opinions, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but just to give my opinions on this whole situation, I gladly welcome it. I know Adrian Peterson made a statement that he says, he is 100% planning on kneeling, and he knows he has teammates around him who are planning on kneeling as well, and I hope they do stick to it, and I hope we can see every team in the NFL having some form of protest and not have it be a divisive moment. I want it to be a uniting moment. It felt like, back when the kneeling protest was, basically the hot topic of the NFL and everyone was doing it, it felt like it was so divisive. It felt like it felt weird. It didn't feel like, because of the way the media portrayed it, the way teams reacted, the way a lot of people reacted, the way, it wasn't a fully unified thing. It was staggered in nature where, some players joined in and a little bit more and a little bit more, and some teams condemned it and some higher ups didn't like it. And, I forget what player had recently tweeted that some GM or some, brass of some franchise told him, do not kneel. We're losing money because of it. When things are presented in that nature, it just seems, it felt not right. Not that they weren't protesting, not that protesting didn't feel right, but the sort of situation and the response to it. The response to it should have been how it's going to be when players kneel next season. Unity, respect for one another, accepting that there's a problem, and letting people show their discontent because they have the full on right to. And it's messed up that a guy, I want to touch on, Colin Kaepernick, lost his job because he kneeled. He lost his job because of something that now the NFL is accepting. Now the NFL is basically promoting and will support. And Colin Kaepernick lost his NFL career because of that. And I don't think he'll ever be in the NFL again. I really, really would like to see him in the NFL, but at this point now, it's going to feel like a pity vote. It's going to feel like, oh, we're so sorry that we were completely wrong the whole time and didn't see it. Why don't you come join an NFL team? And the NFL team that hires Colin Kaepernick is just going to feel like a PR type stunt. It's going to feel like, we want him now because of everything that's going on. And I guess, we'll have to respect what they say and say, we realize that sort of blackballing Colin Kaepernick was, wrong, and we're trying to do better by him and by everyone. It's not going to feel right, but I guess we'll have to respect it because it's like, why didn't you want Colin Kaepernick a couple months ago when he tried out in front of, these scouts and all that? But now you want him all of a sudden. Did he get better at football in the past couple months? Did he get younger? No, you just feel more guilty because of what's going on outside and around the world. And that's why you're going to give him a chance. So, big respect to Colin Kaepernick. I always respected what he was doing, but now it's become a hot topic of discussion because this is what he was kneeling for. He was trying to prevent all this from happening. He was trying to get ahead of this. This, I guess you could call it civil unrest, but I think it's warranted. And he was trying to make a change. And hopefully we get that change sooner rather than later. Of course, this is not a quick and easy process. This takes time. But I'm glad about the kneeling. Can't wait to see it, honestly. Can't wait to see the league, unified, because the world feels unified right now. There's been protests all around the world. This has been literally probably the biggest civil rights. I think they said it was actually with 18 total countries, and all 50 states participated in this protest, making it the biggest civil rights protest in the history of the world, which is pretty insane. I love that, the world and people are coming together. Of course, it's horrible, the circumstances under which that needed to happen, but I'm glad that the world can be unified over this. And so many people, so many people are showing their support. It's honestly a beautiful thing that came from something so tragic. It came from so many tragic events, because there are countless times where things like the George Floyd situation have happened. So hopefully, this changes the NFL for the better. Hopefully now we can finally see, more minority hires, more equal opportunity for those of color, not just assistant positions, opportunities as head coaches, as GMs, as, anything basically in the NFL. So this is very, very cool. I like it. And I also just want to commend the players, Deshaun Watson, Tyrann Mathieu, Pat Mahomes, DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham, all those players, Zeke Elliott, that were in that video. They're saying they want the NFL to condemn racism. Huge props. I really, really like that. Sort of felt like, the employees standing up against their bosses. It was very cool. I liked it. And I like where the NFL is going. I like that it's much more than making an Instagram post about it. It feels like there's going to be a real change. Of course, now comes the hard part. You make the verbal commitment. Now you have to show action, but I'm excited to see where this goes. So I hope you guys are too. With that, guys, I will go into our next break, and move on to some more fantasy football related stuff. These conversations aren't over, though. Of course, I'll keep talking about them as much as I feel I have to, as much as I feel they are relevant, because, these things are bigger than fantasy football. Sorry if you don't agree with that or like that, but these things are much bigger than fantasy football. They are much bigger than, rankings or stats or who's going to win you your league and who you should be drafting. So that's why I wanted to talk about these things first, rather than putting it at the end like I did last week. So, with that, guys, we'll go into our short break, and when we get back, some fantasy football for you guys. Alrighty, guys, stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, I'll finally get into some fantasy football for today. I wanted to go over basically some players that I think you guys should be avoiding on draft day. And of course, I've been keeping up with the ESPN live draft trends. And so I wanted to talk about some receivers and other players who I think you probably should be avoiding come draft day. Now, the first one is very obvious, I think to everyone, and unless you're a Patriots fan, die hard, Julian Edelman. Now, the reason why, I feel like I have to put Julian Edelman on this list is because last season, Julian Edelman finished, I think, in the top 15 of fantasy football wide receivers. And for that reason, I feel like I have to add him because a lot of times what people like to do, and I sometimes suffer from this as well in fantasy football, the recency bias kicks in and they say, oh, he was the top 15 guy last year. But you gotta look at what is going on right now. Tom Brady is gone. He has to build, chemistry with a new quarterback. I think he led the league in drops last season off the top of my head. He's struggled with injury recently. His health hasn't been the best. And I don't think that offense is going to be potent at all. So, I think at any point, I don't want to take Julian Edelman. I don't know about you guys, but I just feel like, even if I'm on the last round and he slipped that far, I don't want him. I feel like he's not going to do much in fantasy football next season. I don't think he's worth a draft pick at any point in time. Even though I know he's going to be, I guess you can consider him the top, threat for the Patriots. It's like, does that mean much? Did it mean much last season? I understand he finished in the top 15, but I know a lot of people weren't saying, oh, Julian Edelman, league winner. Julian Edelman's winning me some games. You know what I mean? I guess unless your team was pretty bad. So stay away from Julian Edelman. Now, another guy I think you guys should stay away from, he's a receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers, Mike Williams. And now, I've been, 2 years ago I was a big proponent of Mike Williams. Last season I drafted him as well because I thought he was going to put up big numbers. He's a huge receiver, great at the jump ball. And of course, remember, this is just about fantasy football, not saying he's a bad player. Not saying he's going to have a bad year. Last season he did have 1,000 yards with 49 receptions. So that's pretty insane, right? But he only had 2 touchdowns. And with that little bit of receptions, that's not the best for fantasy football. Now, last year he ranked 41, and that was with Phillip Rivers. Do we expect him really to be any higher with Tyrod Taylor throwing him the football? I don't think so. So you really have to tamper your expectations, and I don't think Mike Williams is going to be worth a draft pick here. And I guess, okay, yes, you can technically draft these people that I'm talking about here. You can technically draft them in the last round. I know I said I wouldn't take Julian Edelman at all, but I guess if there's really no better option, you know what I mean? I guess you take these guys, but these are not guys that I feel should be, high on your board or a guy you're looking at in the mid to even late rounds. These are going to be guys for the, last rounds. I just feel like the value is a little bit inflated. And I just feel like, it's more based on reputation rather than what is actually going to happen. Now, Mike Williams right now has an ADP as wide receiver 56. And I have no qualms with that. But I just think, if you look at something like this, Mecole Hardman is at wide receiver 58. Sammy Watkins is at wide receiver 57. I'd much rather have those two, rather than Mike Williams, 56, right? And also, you gotta look at, sometimes these players are going to slip in your drafts, because these are average live draft trends, right? With every draft, every mock draft that's going on, it's not your draft. So Mike Williams, could be available when, say, Curtis Samuel, who's supposed to go, who's been going 3 spots ahead of him, is available. And I think I'd much rather have Curtis Samuel, to be honest. Also, there are other receivers, people have talked about Jalen Reagor possibly being very good for the Philadelphia Eagles. I know a lot of people didn't like the pick, but he's, he can go before Mike Williams. So Mike Williams, one of those guys, I think, he's sort of worn out at least my welcome. I think Keenan Allen is staying the top target, and with Tyrod Taylor, who doesn't throw that many passes, most of them are going to go to Keenan Allen, so Mike Williams loses severe value here. Another wide receiver to stay away from, guys, Marquis Goodwin. And I just feel like, I want to talk about this because he's on a new team now. And so I think that, some people might, believe in a resurgence, change of scenery. Marquis Goodwin isn't going to do anything. He hasn't done anything in recent memory. He hasn't stayed healthy enough. I think he's, off the top of my head, 30 now. He's only getting older. Yes, he's a very, very fast receiver. He has top end speed, can take the top off of defense, but I think his best days are clearly far behind him. He's never really done much, to be honest. His average draft position right now is wide receiver 106, so he shouldn't be getting drafted anyway. But I just wanted to mention him because I know that sometimes we look at guys with speed and just assume that's going to be Tyreek Hill, when in actuality, no, that's not the case. Another player I think you guys should be avoiding this. I'm moving on to running back now. James Conner of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, right now he's being drafted at running back 21. But I think I would take guys like Kareem Hunt even before I took James Conner. Now, James Conner's projected just about 180 fantasy football points next season. Where if you look at a guy like Kareem Hunt, he's projected 174. Now, Raheem Mostert, on average, is being drafted after James Conner. He's projected around the same amount. And I think I like Raheem Mostert's situation in San Fran more than I like James Conner's in Pittsburgh, just because James Conner's had some severe durability concerns, and it sort of feels like they're not completely sold on him. I know a lot of people have talked about this being a very defining moment for James Conner in his career, and he has to it's sort of a make or break kind of year. But I right now am not too fond of James Conner, not as a person or anything like that, just for fantasy football's sake. Now, ADP has Mark Ingram going 1 spot after him. I'd definitely take him before I take a guy like Mark Ingram, who is another guy that I want to tell you guys to avoid. But, Raheem Mostert, a young back like Devin Singletary, Kareem Hunt, DeAndre Swift is going after James Conner, guys. And I understand, when you get these rookies, DeAndre, Jonathan Taylor, Cam Akers are all going after James Conner. I think their potential upside, though, makes him so much more attractive right now than a guy, who's missed several games the past 3 seasons and who might be on his way out of Pittsburgh. So just keep your eyes on that. I really don't know if you should be drafting James Conner. That's just my opinion. Of course, you don't have to agree with my opinion. It is what it is. But that's just me. Now, I've spoken about Mark Ingram so much, guys. I don't feel like I have to touch on him too much, but I will. He's in his 30s. His efficiency is completely unsustainable. He had just above, I think it was 202 touches, with 10 rushing touchdowns and 5 receiving or 202 rush attempts, with 10 touchdowns and 1,000 yards. He had 5 yards a carry. And he added 5 more scores, receiving. To me, with Lamar Jackson on that squad, J.K. Dobbins they just got, Gus Edwards still, who's young, and he is very talented. He didn't get that many opportunities, but when he did, he showed some flashes, and I really liked what I saw from him. So I think in Baltimore they're going to be phasing out of that Mark Ingram era, kind of, I guess the short era that it was, but he's only getting older, and I think they have guys who are ready to kind of take the torch from Mark Ingram. So with that, guys, we're going to go into our next break, and when we get back, some more fantasy football, discuss what I think of some more players and their ADPs.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Guys, welcome back. Alright, so right now, I want to get into a sort of a draft scenario and give my opinion on it. Basically, what should you do if you end up in this situation here? Kyler Murray or Dak Prescott? See, I say this because I think most people, the average drafter isn't going to end up with Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, because that requires you wasting a very high pick on him, because a lot of people are taking him. Right now, Lamar's being taken with the 15th overall, and Patrick Mahomes with the 17th overall pick on average. So that's pretty insane. The next quarterback is taken at pick 47. That's Deshaun Watson. After that, 52, Russell Wilson. After that, Kyler Murray at 55 and Dak Prescott at 60 as quarterback 6. Now, after that, it gets interesting, and I'll touch on that for sure. But right now, I really agree with how it is. I would take Kyler Murray over Dak Prescott. And I know that sounds kind of insane, because last season, Kyler Murray finished as QB8, and Dak Prescott finished as QB2. But I'm banking on Kyler Murray's surge forward. It's going to be much more significant. And Dak Prescott is going to have a huge surge backward. And I don't want to fall into that, sort of recency bias category, because Dak Prescott, in my opinion, he's just not in the ranks of the elite like Lamar, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson, Russell Wilson. I think he's just a tier under. And I think, honestly, at this point, Kyler Murray has more upside to become that sort of elite guy, more than Dak Prescott. And I think he's going to take a big step back, and we're going to see him for what he usually is. I don't think he's going to throw for close to 5,000 yards again. And I don't think he'll go 30 touchdowns for 11 picks. I think he'll have a significantly worse season than that. Something closer to what the projection has for him at 4,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, 4 fumbles, and 4 rushing TDs for a total of 297 fantasy points around there. I like that much better than the 337 he scored last season. We have to remember too, guys, Kyler Murray just got DeAndre Hopkins, and I know some people are, I know it's been overstated and you hear about it all the time, but you can't overstate it. It's DeAndre Hopkins. It's one of the best receivers to ever play the game. Let's be real here. Also, Cliff Kingsbury is his coach. And I think Cliff Kingsbury, the young guy, college-oriented guy who sees this amazing new toy, he's definitely going to be passing the ball a ton. Never mind the fact that, Kyler Murray is mobile. Kyler Murray can get it done outside of the pocket, throw on the run, make dynamic plays. And I understand, he didn't have the, even though he was, top 10 fantasy football quarterback, he didn't have the greatest season throwing the football, but it was very respectable. 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, 12 picks. I don't like the touchdown and pick ratio, but again, rookie, 544 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground. I think he's going to take a huge surge forward next season. I think Kyler Murray over Dak Prescott for sure. I agree with these live draft trends, but I want to talk about who is coming after Dak Prescott. Tom Brady. And after him, Drew Brees. After him, Matt Ryan. After him, Josh Allen. So as of right now, you got Carson Wentz at number 12, Matthew Stafford at 13, Aaron Rodgers at 11, all outside of the top 10. This one is very, very interesting. In the 7-day plus or minus, Drew Brees has lost 3 spots. He's going down, and that could honestly have to do with the recent, off the field stuff that's happened, the stuff I was just talking about to begin the show. But honestly, if I had to take someone right now, Dak Prescott over Tom Brady, that is a tough one. But I think I'm taking Dak Prescott here, guys. A lot of people are getting sucked up in the hype of Tom Brady, and the hype of, I am as well. I will state that I am definitely excited to see what this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is going to do. I think they're going to be very high powered. But for me to sit here and say that I believe that, Tom Brady is going to be a top 7 quarterback after he, finishes fantasy football's number 12 quarterback, and he's only getting older, I don't know if I want to believe that just yet. Also, it's very hard for me to believe. It's just hard for me to see, Tom Brady going out there next season and just constantly uncorking deep balls and them just taking the top off defenses, right? I'm thinking of more methodical drives, slower paced, not the greatest statistical type of games, but games that get the job done, methodical, things of that nature. I don't know if I see Tom Brady over Drew Brees here. It just seems a bit absurd. When Drew Brees did end up coming back, he almost passed for 3,000 yards, had 27 TDs, and only 4 interceptions. I mean, come on, guys. It's pretty insane. And while he was sort of inconsistent when he came back, almost every game was over 20 points. He only had 2 games under 20 points, and, I mean, they were pretty significant, both 11.48, one 11.26. But the rest, 24.9, 22.4, 40, 28.28, 22.8, 22.02. I mean, come on. I mean, it's not even close. So, for, Drew Brees to be getting picked 20 picks behind Tom Brady is a bit absurd. I would definitely be taking Dak or Drew Brees over Tom Brady and having Tom Brady more towards the back end of the top 10 if I'm going to be taking him in the top 10 of quarterbacks. So pay attention to that there. Also know who you're drafting with, of course. If there's someone who's buying into that hype, take advantage of them taking Tom Brady early. If they're not someone who jumped on, the top 5, Lamar, Mahomes, Watson, Russell, Kyler, if they take Tom Brady, after that, take that opportunity to take Dak, take Drew Brees, because those are very, very solid picks. And even a guy like Josh Allen has a ton of upside because of his legs. He finished his fantasy football's number 6 quarterback last season, and he definitely has potential. Next season, hopefully he's gotten better with his accuracy. He has potential to repeat and be a top 10 guy. Again, too, guys, remember, Matthew Stafford, outside of the top 10, who I believe is going to have a great season. Aaron Rodgers, a quarterback who's very efficient. Yes, he doesn't put up the huge numbers, but he really doesn't lose that many fantasy football points, which sometimes, a.k.a. Jameis Winston, can really hurt your point total. Carson Wentz, who was a top 10 fantasy football quarterback, huge potential. Of course, he has to stay healthy. Right now, is outside of the top 10 in ADP. So, the quarterback position is always an interesting one. Definitely going to be interesting this season. But with that, guys, we're going to take a short break. And when we get back, we'll get into our last segment of the day. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this short break.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Alrighty, guys, we enter our last segment of the day for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. And with this segment, guys, I want to take time to talk about America's favorite team to hate, the Dallas Cowboys. So, basically, I just want to talk about the Dak Prescott situation because Michael Irvin has come out and sort of backtracked and said that Dak Prescott has been underpaid and that the Cowboys still owe him back pay. This situation is absolutely insane, and at this point it feels like the Cowboys are never going to get a deal done with Dak Prescott. He's going to end up in a situation like his former NFC East rival QB, Kirk Cousins, or as they called him, Kurt Cousins. Dak, he's a solid quarterback. And, as much as I hate on him, as much as I, not that I hate on him on the show, but as much as I would, say I put Kyler Murray above him, I say, he might regress. I do think he's a solid quarterback. I do think he gets the job done. Do I think he's as good as his, last season? Is that the regular Dak Prescott? No, I don't necessarily believe that. But do I think he deserves a new contract? Yes. Should he have taken the deal that we've heard of that was about $36 million a year? For sure. I think it had $110 million in guarantees off the top of my head. But now this is becoming a game of revenge. This is becoming Dak Prescott sticking it to the Joneses for not paying him for the past 4 years that he's been very solid. I think it was 2 Pro Bowl appearances, 2 division wins. Now, since they waited way too long to give him this contract, he is getting payback, and he's doing a good job at it, I honestly would say. I want to say that this deal is never going to get done, and that's what the stance I'm going to stay with, but would I be surprised if Jerry Jones caves and suddenly makes Dak Prescott a $40 million quarterback? I don't know how surprised I would be. Should he do that? No. Right now, if Dak Prescott doesn't, take the extension and he signs the franchise tag, which I don't know if he will do, he'll be making $31.4 million, a significant pay raise. He's made only about $5 million in the past 4 years, so that would multiply his salary by 6 times just playing on the franchise tag. He'd multiply his salary by about 7 times should he sign the extension. Now, this is such an interesting situation because a lot of times, you see players, they're saying, I'm valued at this much, I should be paid this much, and it's based on the recent play, right? But this is not just based on Dak Prescott's recent pay. This is based on the lack of pay he's received for the past 4 years. And I think he's just getting ahead of that Kirk Cousins situation. He doesn't want to end up getting franchise tagged 2-3 years in a row while they wait for him to get injured, or they just trade him, or he falls off and then they say, see, you don't deserve this money. So I like Dak Prescott's position here, but I feel like he got a very fair contract. It's, if you don't want to, if the hard feelings are there, play for another franchise. Request a trade, say, I don't want to be here. Tell them, that they'll trade him. I know, players don't have that kind of sort of like insane power to just say trade me and they get traded, but at this point in time, it seems like the prices are just not right for either of these, sides. Dak Prescott wants an absurd amount of money. What was it, 40 or 45 million in his 5th year if he signs a 5-year extension. The Cowboys gave a very fair offer. Honestly, I can say that offer was very, very fair for Dak Prescott, considering that a lot of his stats came when the Cowboys were behind. Sometimes numbers do lie, guys. There is a saying out there, numbers don't lie, but sometimes they do. Right? There's numbers are much more complex than they just appear on paper. So sometimes you really do have to look deeper into the numbers. Because had the Cowboys not been losing several games, had Dak Prescott put them in positions to be ahead, had they played better as a whole, he wouldn't have had that many stats, right? So, it's a very, very interesting situation in which, we can point to the numbers and say Dak Prescott had his best year. He was the top quarterback in the NFL last season, but, everybody knows why he had those eye-popping numbers. And everybody knows, still that team is sort of Ezekiel Elliott's team. Even though last season it was much more of the Dak Prescott show, a lot of people would tell you that team is, they should be running the ball first, letting Ezekiel Elliott carry that team, and have Dak Prescott as the sort of secondary weapon. And that's because when we saw Dak Prescott without Ezekiel Elliott, he was pretty garbage, right? A couple years ago when Zeke was serving the 6-game suspension. Nonetheless, I'm very, very interested to see where this goes because, Michael Irvin was at one point telling Dak Prescott, take the offer that's on the table. Now he's slowly caving and going towards Dak Prescott's side. So, Michael Irvin, in and out, through and through, a Cowboy. He was part of the dynasties in the 90s. It's pretty insane to see him sort of backtrack here. Just because I know he wants what's most friendly for the Cowboys as a whole, not just Dak Prescott. And I'm wondering now if that sort of echoes what the Joneses are thinking, and if they will cave soon. I understand the sentiment. This is a guy who has severely outperformed his 4th-round draft pick, where he was selected in the 4th round. Severely underpaid his first 4 years. Yes, they should have taken the opportunities way before to extend him. I don't know what on earth they were waiting for, because he's shown that he can be a very capable quarterback. 2 Pro Bowls, 2 division wins. He led them to, I think it was a 13-3 season at one point. And I understand Ezekiel Elliott was going off, but I think they gave too much credit to Ezekiel Elliott, too early, right? Because if you give Dak Prescott the extension 2 years ago, even just a year ago, you're not in this situation here, right? So the Cowboys have dug themselves into this hole, and it's going to be very entertaining to watch them dig themselves out of this hole. And who knows? We could end up with the Cowboys having Andy Dalton as their starter next season. And hey, if that happens, you can go ahead and just book the Eagles for division winners, because I think they're going to be competitive with the Cowboys even when Dak Prescott is their quarterback. And I think Dak Prescott is, in fact, a better quarterback than Andy Dalton. So it's very, very interesting. Like I said, guys, where I stand on it, Dak Prescott just signed a contract that's on hand right now. I think he's gotten an excellent offer. But if his personal stance gets in the way of that, he won't be a Cowboy much longer. I think at some point it becomes a matter of, an ego clash. And Jerry Jones is a guy that we know has a very large ego. And I think at some point, if he feels that he's being disrespected, he's not going to take too fondly of that. And I think he's just going to say, you know what, I'm going to do something that, maybe other owners wouldn't do. And I'm getting rid of this kid, and I'm going to get as much as I can in draft capital to replace him. Tank for Trevor Lawrence, possibly? Who knows? I'm just kidding. I know the Cowboys are in win now mode, and that's what makes it very, very interesting. It's a situation where, if they were at a point where they could rebuild, I don't think Dak Prescott would be on the team right now. But they know that they might need him. And so it's a very, very interesting situation. If you told me I could have Cam Newton over Dak Prescott right now, or have Cam Newton as the backup instead of Andy Dalton, I think I would have done that. I think I would have signed Cam Newton to be Dak Prescott's backup, because that would have been significant insurance, and it would have showed Dak Prescott, we really aren't playing around here. We got a guy who's former MVP waiting. So if you do not like this offer that we're giving you, that is very, very fair, making him $36 a year would be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, then you can gladly walk. Or you play on the franchise tag, and we do this again next season. If you don't want to be here, we got Cam Newton. I think taking that chance with Cam Newton would be worth it, because paying Dak Prescott $40 million plus a year is just not going to cut it. That's just absurd, and that's reserved for the best quarterback in the National Football League, Patrick Mahomes II. Yes, and sorry, I know I'm tooting my own team's horn here, but one of the other reasons, I guess I do have this bias here. If Dak Prescott signs a deal at $40 million a year, my goodness, the Chiefs are going to be crying. We're going to have to let go of some key people to sign Patrick Mahomes to a deal that's more valuable than that, unless Patrick Mahomes becomes the most team-friendly guy and says, you know what, I don't need to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, even though he deserves to be 20 times over, and he takes a cheaper deal. You know, that's the one thing that does bother me. It's sort of, it's not necessarily how good you play or how good you are. Your contract is basically based on who got paid before you and how much they got paid, right? So it's such an interesting sort of thing. Very, very weird in sports that way, because, you know, in the real world, you know, you don't base your, you know, you don't ask for a raise and say, well, hey, I heard that this guy got a certain raise, so I think my raise needs to be this because I'm definitely at least as good as him. It's very, very interesting, very, very weird, and it's such an interesting dynamic because every franchise believes differently with their finances and has different value on their players, and, you know, a very struggling franchise might go ahead and make Dak Prescott a $40 million a year quarterback, but the Dallas Cowboys don't feel that they need to do so, and neither do I and most experts. So with that, guys, that ends our show today for the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I want to thank you all for listening, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Leave a comment below. Leave a comment on, you know, wherever you're listening to this podcast. You know, let us know what you love. Let us know what you hate. It helps us. And always keep it constructive, guys. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, because that helps us as well. And, you know, I just want to say before we go here, guys, make sure you're loving each other, staying safe, and, of course, remembering that even though states are reopening and all that, and if you're out there protesting peacefully, of course, be aware of coronavirus. Stay healthy. Take precautions as necessary. Stay healthy. Stay safe, guys. Love one another. And we'll see you here next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.